I need you to understand something before I tell you this story. This woman, the woman who did what I am about to describe, sat at my kitchen table every single morning for 2 years. She made my coffee. She drove me to my doctor's appointments. She sorted my medication into the little weekly organizer on the bathroom shelf. She held my hand when the arthritis made the stairs difficult. She called me her Dorothy. Her Dorothy. Like I was something precious. Like I was hers. I trusted her completely. Not cautiously, not with reservations, not with one eye open the way you trust a stranger. Completely. The way you trust family. The way you trust someone who has sat at your table and cried real tears when you talked about your late husband. The way you trust someone who has earned it, slowly, patiently, over 2 years of showing up every single day. And while I was trusting her, while I was genuinely, completely, foolishly trusting her, she was signing my name, or on documents I had never seen, presented to institutions I had never visited, authorizing transactions I had never approved, moving money I had spent 53 years building out of accounts I did not even know she had access to. $81,000, my late husband Harold's life insurance, my retirement savings, the emergency fund I had kept in a separate account since 1987, the year Harold had his first health scare, and we decided we would never be caught unprepared again. Gone. And she would have gotten away with every single cent of it, if a 26-year-old bank teller named Priya hadn't looked twice at a signature that did not look right. I am 71 years old. My name is Dorothy Marsh. I am a retired schoolteacher from Columbus, Ohio. I have 2 adult children, 4 grandchildren, a garden I am unreasonably proud of, and a story I never in a million years thought would be mine. Because things like this, financial abuse, forgery, are betrayal by someone you called your closest friend. Those things happen to other people, trusting, naive people who did not know any better. Not to women like me. That is what I thought. I was wrong. And the way I found out I was wrong will stay with me for the rest of my life. Because the phone call that changed everything did not come from the police. It did not come from my children. It came from a bank branch on Hendricks Avenue. And the young woman on the other end of the line was so careful, so precise, so genuinely shaken by what she had found, that I knew before she finished her first sentence that my life was about to be divided into before and after. Stay with me. Because when you hear what Beverly Mason had been planning, how long she had been planning it, how many women she had done it to before me, and how close she came to succeeding, you will want to call someone you love. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. Before I tell you about Beverly, I need to tell you about Harold, because you cannot understand what was stolen from me, what those numbers on that bank statement actually meant, without understanding where they came from. And they came from Harold. From Harold, and from 43 years of the particular kind of marriage where you are not just partners, but a single operating unit, a 2-person machine that runs on trust and compromise and the certain knowledge that someone is always in your corner. Harold Robert Marsh was born in 1949 in Chillicothe, Ohio, the second of 3 boys. No, to a father who ran a hardware store and a mother who gave piano lessons in the living room on Wednesday and Thursday afternoons. He grew up in a house that smelled like sawdust and sheet music, which is as good a description of Harold himself as any I could construct. He was not academic, and he was clear-eyed about this from an early age. Not with shame, not with excuse, but with the practicality of someone who has decided to be excellent at the things he is actually excellent at. In what Harold was excellent at was understanding how things worked. Physical things, systems, the logic of electricity and plumbing and structural load. He could look at a problem in a wall or a circuit panel the way some people look at a sentence, immediately, instinctively reading the grammar of it. He completed his electrician's apprenticeship in 1971 and joined Hartwell Electric in Columbus, where he would remain for 31 years. He was made foreman in 1984, and he was offered a management position in 1991 and turned it down because, he told me, he had no interest in managing paperwork when he could be managing problems. That was Harold. Managing problems. It was his definition of usefulness. It shaped every decision he made for 50 years. He was also, and I say this with the deep affection of someone who lived with it for 4 decades, slightly obsessive about maintenance, not in a disordered way, also in the way of someone who genuinely believed that most catastrophes are preventable if you pay attention before they become catastrophes. He checked the smoke detectors on the 1st of every month. He serviced the furnace every October. He replaced the water heater on a schedule rather than waiting for it to fail. I used to tease him about it. He would look at me with the patient expression of a man who knows he is right. He was usually right. I remember a Sunday in the early 90s when Michael was watching Harold clean the gutters with the expression of a child who could not understand why this was necessary. Harold came down the ladder and looked at the handful of debris he had pulled out and said to Michael with complete seriousness, "You know what this is? This is water damage waiting to happen. This is a ceiling stain and a mold problem and a repair bill, all compressed into a handful of wet leaves." Michael said, "It's just leaves, Dad." Harold said, "Everything that ever went wrong started as something small that someone decided was just something small." Michael did not fully appreciate this at 11. He told me at Harold's funeral that he had thought about those gutters almost every week of his adult life. Harold's approach to money was the same as his approach to gutters. Preventive, methodical, not joyless. He was not a man who denied himself pleasure or treated saving as its own reward. And he was a man who treated financial security the way he treated the smoke detector, as infrastructure, as something that had to be in place so that the other things could happen safely. He had a rule about saving that he had kept since his first paycheck in 1971. 20% of every paycheck went into savings before anything else was allocated. Not after expenses. Before. The expenses were planned around what remained. I adopted this rule when we married. We kept it for 43 years. We had separate savings accounts. His for house maintenance and large purchases, mine for emergencies. We called mine the firewall account. Harold named it that in 1987, after a health scare that turned out to be nothing but frightened us badly enough to sit down at the kitchen table on a Sunday afternoon and do the thing we had been putting off. I remember that Sunday specifically. Harold had laid everything out on the table. The insurance policies, the savings, the house equity, the scenarios. What would happen if one of us couldn't work? What would happen if one of us was gone? He was very calm about it. He was always very calm about things that frightened him. That was how you knew they frightened him. The calmness was his version of bracing. He looked at everything on that table and he said, "Dorothy, I want you to know that if anything ever happens to me, you will be fine." We are going to make sure of that right now. We set up the firewall account that afternoon. $700 to start. He named it that night. The firewall, he said, is the thing between ordinary disaster and catastrophe. By the time Harold died in 2018, it held just over $40,000. 30 years of 20%, 1 month at a time. He had been right. I was fine. Because of that Sunday afternoon. Because of the man who thought about my future even when he was frightened about his own. We met at a church social in 1974. I was 24 years old. He just finished my teaching certification. He was 27, already steady in the way some men are steady from birth. Not exciting, not flashy, but absolutely, reliably, permanently there. We married in 1976. We had our daughter Susan in 1978, our son Michael in 1981. We bought a house on Clearwater Lane in Columbus in 1982. We were not wealthy. We were careful. The distinction matters enormously, and I want you to hold on to it. We disagreed about the television. Harold liked the news, and I liked British dramas, and solved this by having 2 televisions, which felt like an extravagance for years, and which Harold eventually conceded had been the correct decision. We disagreed about the garden. I wanted it beautiful. Harold wanted it functional. We solved this by each having our section. Mine full of roses and lavender, his full of tomatoes and herbs, and a persistent, never quite successful attempt at asparagus. We disagreed about money occasionally, and not about the fundamentals, the 20% rule, the firewall account, the broad architecture of our financial life. We agreed completely about those. We disagreed about the smaller things, whether to replace the kitchen appliances in 2004 or wait until 2006. Whether the Hawaii trip for our 35th anniversary was affordable, or whether affordable was the wrong frame for a 35th anniversary. The Hawaii trip almost did not happen. Harold ran the numbers 3 times, and he determined we could afford it, but that affording it would require some reconfiguration of the Home Maintenance Reserve Fund, which he was reluctant to touch. I said, "Harold, we are 62 years old and in good health, and we have been married for 35 years, and I would like to see a volcano." He looked at his spreadsheet. He looked at me. He booked the tickets. We stood at the edge of a volcano crater at sunrise on our 35th wedding anniversary, and Harold put his arm around me, and I thought, this is what the 20% rule is for. Not just the emergencies. The mornings like this one. He took 37 photographs of the volcano. He was not a photographer. He did not own a good camera. The photographs were not technically accomplished. They are among my most treasured possessions. Harold died in October 2018. A second heart attack. Said to me was, "Have you seen my phone?" said to me was, "Have you seen my phone charger?" I had not. We could not find it. He went to bed without it. I found it 3 days after the funeral, in the pocket of a jacket. I put it in the drawer of his bedside table. It is still there. Funny, the grief of losing Harold was total and unannounced, and reorganized everything I understood about myself. I had known, intellectually, that people grieve. I had attended funerals and understood in the abstract that the death of a spouse was significant. I had not understood that grief has a texture, a specific weight and temperature, that it changes the quality of ordinary things, the way food tastes, the way mornings feel, the way a house that has held 2 people for 36 years sounds when it holds only 1. The silence was the hardest part. Not the quiet, Harold was not a noisy man. The silence of a specific presence gone. The Harold-shaped silence. 43 years of a person, and then the specific absence of them, which is a different thing entirely from simple quiet. By 2020, I was managing. Not thriving. Managing. My arthritis had worsened significantly. I had completed treatment for early-stage breast cancer in 2019, caught quickly, handled, but the treatment had taken something out of me that had not fully come back. My children were attentive but busy, Susan in Cincinnati, Michael here in Columbus, but stretched between his own family and his work. I had my garden. I had my routines. I had my church, my neighbour Eunice, my Tuesday morning book group. What I did not have was someone in the house. And that was the gap that Beverly Mason walked into. She did not walk into it by accident. I understand that now. But understanding it now and having been able to see it then are 2 entirely different things. Beverly Mason was 63 years old when we met. She was introduced to me by my neighbour Eunice in the spring of 2020. Eunice had known Beverly from their church, a different congregation than mine, but close enough to share some social overlap. Beverly had recently retired from a career in hospital administration, Eunice told me. She was widowed herself. Her husband Raymond had died 5 years earlier. She was looking for meaningful ways to spend her time and had mentioned that she found purpose in helping people. She had been informally supporting an elderly aunt and found the work genuinely fulfilling. Eunice thought of me. Beverly came to my house on a Wednesday afternoon in April. She brought a loaf of banana bread she had made herself, still warm, wrapped in a kitchen towel, and she sat across from me at the kitchen table, and she was, without qualification, wonderful. She was warm without being saccharine. She was interested in me without being intrusive. She asked about Harold, not with the careful, pitying tread of someone who has been warned he is a sensitive topic, but with genuine curiosity. The way a friend asks. She made me laugh twice in the first 30 minutes, which had not happened in a very long time. Before she left, she offered to drive me to my Thursday physical therapy appointment. My regular driver had become unreliable, and I had been managing with a combination of Susan's worried long-distance arrangements and Michael's stretched schedule. "I go right past that clinic anyway," she said, pulling on her coat. "It would be no trouble at all. I would enjoy the company." I said yes. She came Thursday. She waited in the waiting room, which no one had done before, and she had a cup of tea ready in her car for the drive home. She had remembered from our 45-minute Wednesday conversation that I liked tea with 1 sugar. That is the detail I return to, even now. The 1 sugar. It was such a small thing, such a precise, attentive, deliberate small thing. By July of 2020, Beverly was coming 5 days a week. It happened organically, or what felt organic. What I experienced as organic. 1 extra visit became a routine became a schedule became a presence so consistent and reliable that I built my days around it. She helped with my medication management, which I had been struggling with since Harold, who had always kept track for both of us. She drove me to appointments. She accompanied me to the grocery store when my hip was bad. She sat with me in the evenings and watched the programs I liked. She sometimes brought food she had cooked, which was always good. She never asked for anything in return, not once. No payment was ever discussed, which I raised with her at one point, and she waved it away. "Dorothy, you are not a client. You are my friend. I do not help my friends for money." My children liked her. Susan met her twice on visits from Cincinnati and reported back that she seemed genuine and caring. Michael had a beer with her once and said she was good people. I told them not to worry. I had Beverly. I had absolutely no idea what I actually had. There was one evening, spring of 2021, about a year into our friendship, when Beverly asked me about my finances. Not directly, not clumsily, conversationally. We were looking at photographs of Harold, and one was from our trip to Hawaii for our 35th anniversary, and Beverly asked how we had managed that, given that teachers' salaries were not known for extravagance. I told her about Harold's saving, about the system we had built together. I told her about the accounts, the general savings, the firewall account, Harold's life insurance payout. I told her with the comfortable openness of someone talking to a close friend, someone who had no reason to treat this information as anything other than the intimacy it was intended to be. She asked good questions, warm, interested questions. She told me Harold sounded like a remarkable man. She told me I was lucky. I told her I knew. I did not think about that conversation again until I was sitting in a police station 12 months later. End flashback. Beverly had a particular gift that I have since come to understand is common to people who do what she did. She had the ability to make you feel simultaneously seen and safe, as if being in her presence was both completely natural and quietly extraordinary, as if you were the most interesting person she had spoken to in months. Given how much she was helping me, given how much she was helping me, given how often she was driving me to appointments and managing schedules and handling administrative tasks that had become genuinely difficult, it might make sense, just practically, for her to have a degree of formal authorization to act on my behalf. A limited power of attorney, so she could make calls when I needed it, deal with insurance companies. Nothing dramatic. Just a limited power of attorney. It would make both our lives easier, Dorothy. I said I would think about it. I thought about it. And then I did not do it. And Beverly never raised it again. Not directly. She did not need me to sign anything. She had already decided that she would sign for me herself. And she had been researching exactly how to do it for months. I want to step outside this story for a moment and tell you something that Dorothy did not know while it was happening. Something that only became clear later, through the investigation, through documents and records and interviews that pieced together what Beverly had been doing, not just during those 2 years, but for 11 years before that. That because Beverly Mason was not a retired hospital administrator who had found purpose in helping others. Beverly Mason was a woman with a history. Beverly Ann Mason was born in 1957 in Zanesville, Ohio, the eldest of 4 children raised by a single mother after her father left when Beverly was 9 years old. She was, by all accounts from people who knew her then, a capable and watchful child. The kind who understands early that information is a form of power and that paying attention to people, really paying attention, the kind that makes them feel seen, is the most disarming thing a person can do. She married young, at 22, to a man named Raymond Mason who worked in hospital supply logistics. They moved to Columbus in 1982. She spent 14 years in hospital administration, rising to department manager, organized and methodical and precise in everything she did. Raymond died in 2015. Beverly had grieved him genuinely. People who knew her at the time said the loss changed her in visible ways. And then Beverly Mason became something else. The first documented incident involving financial irregularity was in 2011, 4 years before Raymond died, which complicates any narrative I might have constructed about grief making a person into this. In 2011, a colleague at the hospital, an older woman named Harriet in the billing department, he discovered $300 missing from a petty cash fund that only Beverly had accessed. The matter was handled internally. Beverly was not charged. She resigned. We know about this because Detective Gutierrez's team found Harriet. She was 79 years old and living in a retirement community outside Columbus. She told investigators, "I always suspected Beverly, but the administration did not want the trouble." $300 in 2011. That is where it started, and as far as investigators could establish. By the time Beverly sat down at my kitchen table in April 2020, she had been doing this, in one form or another, with growing sophistication, for 9 years. The amounts had grown. The methods had become more refined. The selection process for targets had become deliberate and clinical. In Beverly's home office, investigators found that filing cabinet. Inside, organized with the precision of someone who had been doing this for a long time, and were 9 files. 9 women, across 11 years, in various stages of Beverly's process. 5 files were marked closed. These were the women Beverly had already completed her work with, taken what she came for, and moved on. Their files contained final account balances, transaction records, notes on the exit, and in 2 cases the civil complaint documents that had been filed and settled. 2 files were marked active, and women Beverly was currently cultivating, somewhere in months 3 through 8 of her approach, in the warm friendship phase, the one sugar in the cup phase. These women did not know they were in a file. When investigators contacted them, both said the same thing. She seemed so genuine. One file was mine, 47 pages, marked in progress, with a target date for the first financial move, and one file was labelled simply, Raymond. Raymond was Beverly's late husband, and investigators opened that file expecting personal papers, insurance documents, estate records, the ordinary paperwork of widowhood. What they found was different. The Raymond file contained notes Beverly had kept about her own husband. Financial notes organized by account and by date. Notes tracking his account access, his spending patterns, his insurance policies, the beneficiary designations on his retirement accounts. Notes that began, investigators determined, drew approximately 8 months before Raymond's death. Raymond Mason died of a heart attack in 2015. He was 58 years old. His death was ruled natural and there was no investigation at the time. The file does not prove Beverly had anything to do with Raymond's death. I want to be completely clear. She was never charged with anything relating to her husband. A heart attack at 58 is not rare, but the file exists. See 8 months of careful observation of a dying man's financial situation by the woman who was his wife and his heir. The file is real, and the dates are real, and the notes are in Beverly's handwriting. I think about that file sometimes. I think about the grief Beverly brought to my kitchen table, the genuine grief, the real grief of a woman who had lost her person. And I think about the filing cabinet. And I understand that grief and a filing cabinet full of targets can exist in the same person at the same time. That is the most disturbing thing I have learned from this entire experience. Evil does not require the absence of feeling. Sometimes it uses feeling as its instrument. The 2 women in the active files were contacted immediately by investigators. Neither had lost money. Neither had any idea what was coming. Beverly had not yet made her move on either of them. In her own language, but in her own notes, they were in cultivation. I want to walk you through Beverly's methodology in real time, month by month, because understanding exactly how she built this is important, not just for this story, but for anyone watching who has an elderly parent, a grandparent, a neighbor they worry about. This is how it works. This is the playbook. I am giving it to you, so you can recognize it. Month 1 was about presence and warmth with no demands. Beverly came to my house for the first time on a Wednesday. She brought banana bread. She stayed 90 minutes. She left without asking for anything, without establishing any expectation of return, without suggesting any arrangement. But in those 90 minutes, she had done several things that were not accidental. She had learned my coffee preference, Harold's name and the year he died, that my children lived at a distance, that I had arthritis in my hip, the layout of the house. She had established that I found her presence pleasant. She drove past my house the following Saturday morning. Investigators found this in her phone's location data. She drove past to see whether Michael's car was there. It was not. She noted this in her file. On Thursday, she called to offer the physical therapy drive. The timing was calculated. She had learned my Thursday appointment from our Wednesday conversation. The key to what Beverly did in months 2 through 6 was never to ask for trust directly. She let trust accumulate the way sediment accumulates, through consistent, unremarkable deposits over time, each one individually invisible, the whole structure only visible from above. She came Tuesdays and Thursdays initially. By month 3, she had suggested Wednesdays. By month 4, she was coming 5 days a week for what she called check-ins. Each addition was framed as a response to a specific, a genuine need I had expressed. She did not say, "I want to come more often." She said, "I noticed you mentioned the pharmacy was difficult last week. I could take you on Mondays since I am in that area. Notice the structure of that offer." It demonstrates she had been listening closely enough to remember a detail mentioned in passing. It presents itself as incidental. She is already in that area. It requires nothing of me except agreement. I said yes every time because each individual yes seemed completely reasonable. It is only when you see all the yeses together on a timeline that the shape of the thing becomes visible. And by the time the shape was visible, it was already done. The grocery store visits were the first place I noticed what I would later call Beverly's competence performance. She was extraordinarily good at anticipating what I needed before I asked for it. The high shelves, the heavy bags, the checkout lines when the hip was bad. At the time, I experienced this as attentiveness, the wonderful, rare, nearly intoxicating attentiveness of someone who pays real attention to you. What I understand now is that she was building a record of my limitations. Every time she helped me with a high shelf, she was noting the high shelves. Every limitation she assisted with was a limitation she filed away. She was constructing a Dorothy, a different Dorothy. The Dorothy she would need me to be when the time came. A Dorothy who needed things, whose independence was already quietly compromised. The picture was not entirely false. I did need some things. My arthritis was real. But the picture Beverly was building erased my competencies, my mental sharpness, my financial literacy, my ability to manage my own affairs, while amplifying my needs. By month 6, October 2020, Beverly was at my house 5 days a week, and she had a key. I had given it to her after an incident where she had arrived when I was in the backyard and could not hear the door. She had waited on the front step for 15 minutes without calling, which she easily could have done. The key incident, investigators later determined, had been engineered. She had arrived at a time she knew I would be in the garden. She had waited the full 15 minutes without calling in order to create the natural, reasonable context for a key. When I offered the key, she accepted it with the perfect calibration of reluctance and warmth. She did not want to put me out, she said. Only if I was sure. I was sure. In her file, investigators found a note from October 2020. 2 words. The second half of Beverly's first year was dedicated to mapping my financial situation completely. She did this through conversation, through the specific art of asking questions that feel like friendship and function as intelligence gathering. She asked about Harold's career. She asked about the house, when we had bought it, whether we had considered selling. She asked about my teaching pension. She asked about the firewall account in April 2021, almost exactly a year into the friendship, in the warm, interested language of someone learning about the man I had loved. She did not ask, "How much money do you have?" She never asked anything so direct. She asked about Harold, and in answering those questions, warmly, gratefully, all with the pleasure of talking to someone who seemed to understand Harold's significance, I gave her every piece of financial information she needed. In her files, on a page dated 3 weeks before she raised the power of attorney conversation with me, investigators found she had estimated my accounts to within $240 of their actual balances. She had been planning this before she raised the power of attorney conversation. The conversation was not a beginning. It was a checkpoint. When I declined to sign, she had already moved to her backup plan. The backup plan required one more person, a man named Gerald Purcell, and Gerald Purcell was already waiting. Let me explain exactly what a forged power of attorney is, because the legal mechanics matter here. A power of attorney is a legal document that authorizes one person, the agent, to act on behalf of another, the principal, in financial or personal matters. It requires the principal's signature. I witnessed and notarized, with the notary physically present to verify identity and confirm the signing is voluntary. Beverly obtained blank power of attorney forms online. She practiced my signature. We know this because investigators found practice sheets in her home, 7 pages of my signature, in various states of accuracy, dated across a 3-month period in late 2021. She was methodical about this too. She did not practice once and decide she was good enough. She practiced across 3 months, refining, correcting, getting closer. She was close. She was very close. But she was not exact. Legal note: power of attorney fraud. Forging a power of attorney is a felony in all 50 states, charged simultaneously as identity theft, forgery, and fraud. The crime carries enhanced penalties when committed against a vulnerable adult. A notary who knowingly certifies a document without the signer present is a criminal accomplice. The notary Beverly used was a man named Gerald Purcell, 61 years old, a retired insurance agent who had obtained his notary commission in 2019 and ran a small mobile notary service out of his car. He and Beverly had met at a neighborhood bar in the Clintonville area of Columbus. They had been acquainted for several months before Beverly approached him. What Beverly offered Gerald Purcell was money, a flat fee of $1,500, paid in cash, to notarize a power of attorney document without the signer present. Purcell did not ask questions. He accepted the fee. This is important. Without Purcell's cooperation, the forged power of attorney could not have been used at most financial institutions. Beverly could forge my signature. She could not forge a legitimate notary stamp. Those are registered, traceable, verifiable. She needed a human being willing to participate. Gerald Purcell was that human being. He was later charged as an accomplice. He was convicted. He lost his notary commission. He was sentenced to 22 months, serving 14. He claimed he had believed it was a family matter, a daughter acting for an elderly mother who was reluctant to come in herself. The court found his claimed ignorance implausible. I find it implausible too. But I also find it important. Beverly Mason could not have done what she did alone. A forged power of attorney at two financial institutions where I had accounts I did not use frequently. Not my primary bank, where the staff knew me by sight. She planned around the relationships I had. She understood my landscape. She then came to First Community Bank on Hendricks Avenue to access my savings account. That is where she met Priya Chandrasekaran. Priya told me Beverly had arrived at approximately 10:15 on a Tuesday morning. Organized, pleasant, completely confident. She had a folder with all the documents tabbed, which Priya noted as unusual. Most people presenting a power of attorney for the first time are less prepared. Beverly had clearly done this before. Priya processed the documents in order. She checked Beverly's identification. She pulled up the account. She verified everything. And then she looked at the signatures. She had seen thousands of signatures by that point. 3 years at a bank window means you develop a visual memory for them, the way a musician develops an ear for pitch. Not infallible, not forensic, just someone who had looked at enough signatures to notice when something was slightly off. She said, the D was wrong. She could not have explained technically what was wrong with it in that moment. She just knew it was wrong the way you know a note is slightly flat. Not dramatically flat, barely flat, but flat. She excused herself. She went to her manager. He agreed something was off. They told Beverly they needed to verify the document. Standard procedure. Beverly was completely composed. She thanked them. She left. Priya watched her go. She said something about the way Beverly left was too smooth, too practiced. Her protocol required it, because she thought, if this is my grandmother, I want someone to call her directly. What I want you to know about Priya is this. She did not have to make that call. Her responsibility ended when she flagged the document, but Priya picked up the phone because she thought, if this is my grandmother, I want someone to call her directly. She is 26 years old, and that one thought, that extension of empathy from a bank teller to a stranger, changed everything that followed. Legal note. Following Dorothy's case, First Community Bank implemented mandatory video or in-person verification for all POA-based transactions over $5,000 across all branches, affecting approximately 47,000 account holders. The case was cited in a 2023 Ohio Banking Commission report on elder financial abuse prevention. 47,000 people. The same number as the pages in Beverly's file about me. 47 pages of notes on how to exploit Dorothy Marsh. 47,000 people now protected because of what those pages helped bring to justice. I do not believe in coincidences. I believe in Harold's gutters. I was deadheading roses when the phone rang. I remember that specifically. The roses. I had my gardening gloves on, and I almost did not answer because of the gloves. If I had let it go to voicemail and called back in an hour, Beverly would have had time to run. I answered. The woman on the line identified herself as Priya Chandrasekaran from First Community Bank on Hendricks Avenue. She was careful and precise, and she said, Mrs. Marsh. I think you need to come in as soon as possible. I believe someone has been accessing your accounts without your knowledge. I called Michael first. He answered on the second ring. I told him what the bank had said, and I heard the particular silence of a son trying to stay calm for his mother. Do not touch anything, Mom. Do not call anyone. I am coming right now. He was at my house in 22 minutes. I know because I sat on the front porch steps and I counted them. 22 minutes from the end of that call to his car pulling up. In those 22 minutes, I thought about the morning coffee, the one sugar. The way Beverly held my arm on the steps when the hip was bad, the way she had cried, actual tears, when I showed her the last photograph of Harold. I thought, she cried real tears. I watched her cry them, and then I thought, or she is very good at performing feeling, and I have no way to know the difference. I sat on those steps and I understood something I had never had cause to understand before. That love and manipulation are not mutually exclusive. Did not make me feel better. It did not make me feel better. It made me feel worse. Michael drove me to the bank. We sat with Priya and her manager, Thomas Reyes, who showed me the power of attorney document and the signature. I looked at it for a long time. Don't I have a very distinctive capital D? Harold always called it my architectural D because it looked designed rather than written. The signature on the power of attorney had no architectural D. It had a plain, slightly hurried approximation. That is not my signature, I said. Thomas Reyes nodded and opened the folder in front of him. Mrs. Marsh, this document has been presented at 2 other institutions, and we need you to look at these statements and tell us which transactions you authorized. I picked up the first statement. I began to read. I put it down after the 3rd line. None of them. I authorized none of them. $81,240, 8 months. And I had not noticed. I had trusted Beverly so completely, had so thoroughly handed her the administration of my daily life, that I had not noticed. How did you not notice? That is the question I have been asked most often, by police, by my children, by people who have heard this story. The answer is uncomfortable and honest. After Harold died, I stopped checking my accounts regularly. The day-to-day finances had always been checked and balanced with Harold sitting across the table, and without him, the act of opening the accounts felt like sitting at a dinner table set for one. I avoided it. Beverly knew this. I had told her, one evening over wine, that I had been struggling to keep up with the paperwork side of things. She had offered to help. She had started organizing my mail into categories on a little caddy she brought to the house. She was doing 2 things simultaneously, genuinely helping me, which made me more dependent on her and less likely to notice anything, and carefully managing the information I saw, ensuring that bank statements showing irregular activity ended up in the category she handled rather than the one I reviewed. It was elegant. I say that with the bitterness of someone who has been outsmarted and knows it. It was elegant in the way that a trap is elegant, designed precisely for the creature it intends to catch. The 3 accounts Beverly accessed were my savings account, Harold's life insurance payout account, and the firewall account. The firewall account. Harold's voice in my memory that Sunday afternoon in 1987. Dorothy. And the firewall is the thing between ordinary disaster and catastrophe. She took $41,000 from it, more than half of everything Harold had put in over 30 years. She chose that account specifically. I know this because her notes said so. She called it the primary target. I do not have words for what it meant to have the last provision of a man I loved for 43 years stolen by someone I trusted with the stories about him. I have looked for those words for 2 years. They do not exist. Thomas Reyes filed a suspicious activity report that same afternoon. Within 48 hours, the Columbus Police Department's Elder Fraud Unit had opened an investigation. The lead investigator was Detective Rosa Gutierrez. 6 years in elder fraud. She was the first person who, when I described Beverly and her warmth and the one sugar in the cup, did not look at me with pity. She looked at me with recognition. Mrs. Marsh, everything you have described is consistent with a specific and well-documented pattern. What Beverly did to you has a name. Elder financial abuse through caregiver grooming. And you are not the first person she has done it to. She told me about the previous complaints, the civil settlement, the restraining order, information that had never been compiled in one place because it had never needed to be before. And then she told me what her team had found in Beverly's home, the filing cabinet, and 9 files, 5 closed, 2 active, 1 mine, 47 pages, and the Raymond file. And on the first page of my file, in Beverly's own hand, at the top of the page, low risk of early detection. Those 4 words. I have thought about them more than I have thought about the money, because those 4 words tell you everything you need to know about who Beverly Mason actually was. Not a friend who crossed a line, not someone who made a terrible choice in a desperate moment, i.e. a predator who had identified me as a suitable target and spent 2 years becoming indispensable before she struck, and who had done it before. And before that, and before that. Between the Tuesday afternoon when Priya called me and the Thursday morning when Beverly Mason was arrested, there were approximately 44 hours during which Beverly did not know the investigation had begun. During those 44 hours, Beverly went about her life. She went to the grocery store. She had dinner with a friend. She attended her Thursday morning exercise class at the YMCA. And on Wednesday, the day after Priya called me, the day after I sat in that bank and watched 50 years of saving disappear into a folder, Beverly showed up at my house at 8 in the morning with a coffee and a cinnamon roll from the bakery on 5th, the way she did every Wednesday. Detective Gutierrez had asked me to behave normally, not to confront Beverly, not to give any indication that anything had changed. I want to tell you that I found this easy. I did not find this easy. I answered the door. Beverly handed me the coffee. 1 sugar, extra hot the way I liked it in winter. She smiled. She asked how I was sleeping. She sat at my kitchen table in the chair she always sat in. And I sat across from her and I looked at the woman who had been in my house every day for 2 years. The woman who had held my hand when I cried about Harold. Fine, Beverly, I said. Just a little fine, Beverly, I said. Just a little tired. She nodded. She squeezed my hand. She left at 10. At 10:15, Detective Gutierrez called. The arrest warrant had been issued. Beverly was arrested the following morning as she left her exercise class. She was in her workout clothes. She had a smoothie in her hand. She did not, by multiple accounts, look like someone who expected this. I was in my garden when Detective Gutierrez called to tell me, "Mrs. Marsh, she is in custody." I sat down on the garden bench, the one Harold built in 1994 from cedar, the one that has been there so long it has become part of the landscape. And I put my phone in my lap, and I looked at the roses. I did not cry. I had expected to cry. What I felt instead was something harder and quieter than tears. Something closer to the specific exhaustion of a person who has been holding something very heavy for several days and has just been told they can set it down. Then I called Susan. Susan told me later about the moment Dorothy called. She said when she heard Beverly had been arrested, she stood in her kitchen and thought about every time she had met Beverly, the warm impression she had come away with. She told me, I kept thinking. I looked at her. I looked right at her, and I thought she was good people. And I was so relieved Mom had her. And the whole time, she could not finish that sentence for a while. She said the thing that haunted her was not the money. It was the notes, the 47 pages, the phrase low risk of early detection, the knowledge that Beverly had been assessing her mother for vulnerability in the same clinical language a researcher uses to assess prey. She looked at my mother and saw a target, and I looked at Beverly and saw a friend. Beverly was charged with elder financial abuse, identity theft, forgery, and fraud, 4 felony counts. The 5th charge, witness tampering, would come later. Her lawyer argued at the bail hearing that she was a low flight risk because she had deep community ties and was herself a devoted caregiver to several elderly community members. Several elderly community members, meaning there were other women, and they were still in her orbit. Over the course of the investigation, Detective Gutierrez and her team identified 5 women across an 11-year period who had been financially exploited by Beverly Mason. 2 had died before the investigation began. 1 was in a memory care facility and could not testify. 2 were living, Margaret Holloway in Columbus and Dolores Patterson in Dayton, and both came forward. The total amount stolen across all 5 women, across 11 years, then was approximately $420,000. From my $81,000, investigators recovered $63,000 through asset seizure and Beverly's existing accounts. The remaining $18,000 was gone, spent, dissolved, unrecoverable. I keep a piece of paper in my kitchen drawer with the number 63,000 on it. Not because I need to be reminded, because Harold would have wanted me to know that most of it came back. Most of the firewall held, and he built it strong enough that most of it held. Detective Gutierrez said that Beverly Mason's files were among the most comprehensive she had encountered in 6 years of this work. Most perpetrators operate on instinct and experience. They do not document. Beverly documented everything. She said Beverly Mason believed she was going to succeed. She documented because she was organized and methodical, and because in 11 years of doing this, she had never been caught. The documentation was the behavior of someone who expected to get away with it. She paused. Then she said, Priya Chandrasekaran is the reason Beverly Mason no longer expects that. She also said, Dorothy was one of the strongest people I have worked with in this unit. Not because she did not grieve the second loss. The loss of the friendship she believed was real. She did grieve it. But she did not let the grief obscure the clarity. Dorothy understood that Beverly being capable of genuine warmth did not make what she did less criminal. Both things could be true simultaneously. A lot of victims struggle to hold both things. Dorothy held both things from the beginning. We are halfway through Dorothy's story. You have heard the filing cabinet, the 47 pages, the 11 years, 5 women, and you have heard about Priya Chandrasekaran, 26 years old, one Tuesday morning, 1 second look at a signature. What comes next is the trial, and the verdict, and the thing that nobody in that courtroom saw coming. The twist at the end of this story that I promise you are not expecting. Stay with us. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. The trial was set for October 2022, 8 months after Beverly's arrest. 8 months during which I met regularly with Assistant District Attorney Carol Whitfield, who was 38 years old and had the specific combination of precision and genuine passion that the best prosecutors carry. Carol told me at our first meeting that the case was strong. The signature analysis was definitive. She had 2 independent forensic document examiners. The bank records were comprehensive. The filing cabinet was, she said, one of the most damning pieces of evidence she had encountered in a fraud case. She wrote it down, Carol said. She documented her own methodology. She left us a blueprint. She also told me that Margaret Holloway and Dolores Patterson had agreed to testify. Their testimony establishes pattern and intent. It transforms a single case into evidence of a career criminal operating with deliberate methodology. It is the difference between a difficult case and an overwhelming one. I called Carol that evening and told her I wanted to testify. I was expecting that call, Carol said. 3 weeks before the trial began, Beverly made her mistake with Eunice. Beverly called Eunice and asked her to reach out to me, as a friend, not as a representative, to suggest the matter might be resolved without a trial. Eunice called me immediately. Then she called Detective Gutierrez. Beverly's attempt to use Eunice as an intermediary was construed as witness tampering. It was added to the charges as the fifth count, and it had the precise opposite of its intended effect. It made me certain I was going to that courtroom. The trial lasted 9 days. I attended every single one, in the second row with Michael on my left and Susan on my right. Eunice came on 3 of the days. Detective Gutierrez, who was not required to attend, came on 4. And Beverly sat at the defense table in a grey blazer over a white blouse. Conservative, modest, the visual language of someone dressed by a lawyer who knows what juries respond to. She looked at me on the second day with an expression I have spent considerable time trying to read. It was not guilt. It was something more complicated than guilt, the expression of a person looking at something they feel they were entitled to and did not get. That expression told me everything I needed to know about whether there was any version of Beverly Mason I still needed to grieve. There was not. Carol Whitfield's opening argument lasted 42 minutes. She began with the 2 mugs. She described a morning routine. 2 mugs, morning coffee, a woman who made it the same way every day. The intimacy of it, the care encoded in the 1 sugar. 2 years of mornings. 2 years of what looked like friendship and functioned as intelligence gathering. Her position is that these qualities were tools, deployed with precision and patience in the service of a single objective, the theft of an elderly widow's life savings. She said, "You will also hear about a 26-year-old bank teller named Priya Chandrasekaran who looked twice at a signature when she did not have to, who, or by that act of professional attention, saved Dorothy Marsh $63,000 and helped bring to justice a woman who had been operating this scheme against this class of victim for 11 years. The jury was very still. I watched them. She said, "The evidence in this case is comprehensive. It is documented in Beverly Mason's own handwriting. It is traceable in financial records matching to the day and the dollar. It was a plan, executed with patience and skill over 2 years, against a woman who had done nothing to deserve it except trust another person." Day 3. The Forensic Document Examiners. Dr. Patricia Hollins, 21 years with the FBI before private practice, walked the jury through 11 specific, measurable, documented points of comparison between my authentic signature and the forgery. She said, "The most significant indicator is the initial letter, Mrs. And Marsh's authentic D exhibits what we call an ascending approach stroke with a specific angular departure. This is a habitual characteristic. It appears in every one of the 12 authentic samples I examined. It is absent in the questioned document." She was asked if the signature was mine. She said, "No, it is a simulation, an attempted reproduction by someone who had studied Mrs. Marsh's signature but had not developed the habitual motor patterns that produce it. The defense raised the arthritis theory, that physical changes in my hands might explain the variation. Dr. Hollins considered this carefully. She said, "In arthritis-related signature variation, we see degradation affecting all aspects of the letter form equally. What we see in the authentic samples is consistent with normal biological variation. What we see in the questioned document is consistent with simulation. They are different kinds of variation entirely." Day 4. The bank records. Thomas Reyes walked the jury through 8 months of transactions across 3 accounts. His fraud unit had prepared a chart. 8 large withdrawals from my accounts, 8 matching deposits in Beverly's accounts on the same day for the same amount. 8 times. Not approximately, exactly. Carol asked, "What is the likelihood these correlations occurred by coincidence?" "In 32 years of banking," he said, "the likelihood is negligible. These are not approximate correlations. They are exact." Day 4 also brought the filing cabinet notes. Carol read passages aloud. She read them slowly, with a deliberateness that gave the words room to land completely. When she read the phrase "low risk of early detection," I heard Susan exhale beside me. 3 jurors looked directly at Beverly. Beverly looked at the table. Day 5. Margaret Holloway and Dolores Patterson. Margaret was 74. She sat in that witness box with the dignity of someone who has decided that dignity is the appropriate response to indignity. She described Beverly, the warmth, the attentiveness, the gradual, involuntary surrender of financial oversight that Beverly had facilitated so skillfully that Margaret had not noticed it happening until $32,000 were gone. She looked at Beverly and said, "I want you to know that I am not angry at myself for trusting you. I was operating correctly. I was being a decent human being who extended trust to someone who appeared to deserve it. You were operating incorrectly. I want that distinction to be absolutely clear." Several jurors wrote that down. I wrote it in my memory. Dolores Patterson was 78. She had brought her granddaughter, who sat in the gallery and watched her grandmother with an expression of ferocious, attentive pride. Dolores did not cry. She did not perform emotion. She spoke in the careful, measured tones of someone who has processed a great deal of something difficult and come out the other side with her clarity completely intact. Were partners. The kindness was the were partners. The kindness was the vehicle for the crime. The crime was the destination. The kindness got her in the door. Please do not reward the door opening. Beverly's lawyer declined to cross-examine Dolores extensively. Dolores walked back to her seat. Her granddaughter took her hand. I thought, if Harold could see this room, this day, these women, he would know we built the right firewall. I testified on day 7. Carol asked me to describe my relationship with Beverly Mason. I had prepared a careful, factual description. But I sat in that witness box and I looked at Beverly and I said what was actually true. She was my closest friend for 2 years. I loved her. I trusted her completely. And I would like the court to understand that those two things, being loved and being betrayed, are not mutually exclusive. She can be both the woman who held my hand when I talked about my late husband and the woman who stole the money he spent 30 years saving to protect me. Both things happened. Both things are true. The courtroom was very still. I then described every financial transaction in the investigation. I described what each account had meant. And I described Harold naming the firewall account and what he had said on that Sunday afternoon in 1987. Beverly Mason took $41,000 from an account my husband spent 30 years building to make sure I would be all right if he was gone. Harold died in 2018. He is gone. And because of Beverly Mason, the thing he built to protect me was used against me. The theft was not of money. The theft was of Harold's provision, of his protection. Art were crying. Beverly's lawyer asked 3 were crying. Beverly's lawyer asked 3 questions about my memory and my account management habits. I answered them precisely. He sat down. Carol stood for redirect. "Mrs. Marsh, how did Beverly come to know about the firewall account?" "I told her," I said. "Over wine. On an evening when I trusted her with a story about my husband. I told her willingly. Or the way you tell things to friends." I walked back to my seat. Michael took my hand. The night before the jury came back, I could not sleep. At 2 in the morning I got up. I made chamomile tea. I sat at the kitchen table, the same table Beverly had sat at for 2 years. And I got out a piece of paper. I wrote Harold a letter. I have never done this before and I have not done it since. But at 2 in the morning, the night before the verdict, with my tea going cold and the clock ticking in the hallway, it was the right thing to do. Harold. Tomorrow the jury comes back. I do not know what they will decide, and I have told myself not to attach my sense of justice to the outcome. If there is one thing 31 years of teaching other people's children has taught me, it is that you cannot control the outcome of anything, only what you put into it. I put everything I had into this. A woman named Beverly Mason spent 2 years being my friend, and she was a real friend, in many of the ways that matter, and she was also stealing from me the entire time. I know you would want me to hold both things at once, and I am trying. She took $41,000 from the firewall, Harold, from the firewall specifically. I could not decide whether to feel devastated or furious, or whether to feel something like dark humor at the audacity of it. I have felt all three, at different times, sometimes in the same afternoon. Most of it came back. I want you to know that. $63,000 of the 81 came back through the asset recovery. The firewall held mostly. You built it strong enough that mostly it held. I keep thinking about what I want to remember from all of this. Not the worst parts. What I want to remember is Priya Chandrasekaran, 26 years old, looking twice at my signature because she thought, what if this is my grandmother? I want to remember Susan's face. I want to remember Detective Gutierrez calling me on her day off. I want to remember Eunice showing up at court on 3 of the 9 days, sitting in that gallery, being present for something she did not cause and could not have prevented and showed up for anyway. I want to remember that the world still has people like that in it, like Priya and Susan and Rosa and Eunice and Margaret. Beverly Mason spent 11 years studying the world through its worst people. Or I have spent 2 years learning it through its best ones. I think I got the better education. I miss you every single day. Some days the missing is quiet, just a background note that everything runs on. Some days it is the whole music. Tonight, it is the whole music. The firewall held, Harold. Go to sleep. All my love. Dorothy. I folded the letter and put it in the pocket of my cardigan. I rinsed my cup and went back to bed. I slept for 4 hours, which was more than I expected. The next afternoon, the jury came back. The jury deliberated for 6 hours. I sat in the second row between Michael and Susan. Eunice was 2 rows behind. Detective Gutierrez was by the door. She had come on her day off. Beverly was brought in. She straightened her blazer. She looked at the jury filing in. The 4 persons stood when the judge asked if the jury had reached a verdict. He said yes. Count 1, elder financial abuse, guilty. Count 2, identity theft, guilty. Count 3, forgery, guilty. Count 4, fraud, guilty. Count 5, witness tampering, guilty. Michael put his arm around me. Susan gripped my hand hard enough that I felt it in my arthritis, and I did not care at all. Beverly made a small involuntary sound. Not quite a cry, more like the sound of someone who has been holding their breath for 8 months and has finally run out of air. I put my hand in my cardigan pocket. I held the letter. I felt, I want to be honest about this, something complicated. Not pure triumph, not simple satisfaction. The specific weight of 5 guilty verdicts for a woman I had loved. And underneath that weight, underneath the complicated grief of it all, something solid and clean and permanent. Justice. Harold's money. My trust. Honored. Sentencing was 6 weeks later. I submitted a victim impact statement. Susan and Michael both did. Margaret Holloway submitted one from Columbus. Dolores Patterson from Dayton. Oh, and Eunice submitted one. A woman who had not lost money, had not been a direct victim, who had simply been the door Beverly walked through to get to me. I did not know Eunice was going to submit a statement until Carol told me. You did not have to do that, I said, when I called her. I know, Eunice said. I wanted to. The judge read all 5 statements in full. Then she addressed Beverly directly. She said, You exploited not merely Mrs. Marsh's finances, but her loneliness and her grief. Or you identified her vulnerability and you weaponized it. You made her feel that she had gained something, a friend, a companion, a presence in a house that had become too quiet. And you used that feeling as the mechanism of her exploitation. And you chose wrong when you chose Dorothy Marsh. Beverly Mason was sentenced to 7 years in state prison, eligible for parole in 4.5 years with good behavior. Gerald Purcell was sentenced separately to 22 months. He served 14. The asset recovery process returned $63,000 to me over the following 8 months. $18,000 is gone, spent, dissolved, unrecoverable. I keep a piece of paper in my kitchen drawer with the number 63,000 on it, because Harold would have wanted me to know that most of it came back. Most of the firewall held. He built it well enough that most of it held. 6 months after the verdict, I went back to the First Community Bank on Hendricks Avenue. So I asked for Priya Chandrasekaran. She came out from behind the counter and she looked at me with the slightly uncertain expression of someone who is not sure what this reunion means. I had baked her a pie, apple, with the lattice crust Harold had taught me in 1978. I had put it in a box and driven it to that bank on a Tuesday morning, and I handed it to a 26-year-old woman who had looked twice at a signature and saved $63,000 and quite possibly my independence. "No, you did not have to do this," she said. "You looked twice," I said, "when you did not have to, when it would have been easier and faster and completely normal to look once. You looked twice. I wanted you to know what that meant." She stood with the pie box in her hands and she said, "They trained us to look twice. It is part of our elder financial abuse protocols. I was just doing what I was trained to do. Then I am also grateful to whoever trained you." We stood there for a moment in the lobby. Then she said something I was not expecting. "Mrs. Marsh, after your case, our bank changed its protocols. We now require video or in-person verification with the account holder before processing any POA-based transaction over $5,000. Any branch, any account. Your case is why that policy exists." I stood with that for a moment. "How many customers does this bank have?" "About 47,000. I thought about 47,000 people. 47,000 Dorothys, with their firewalls and their Harold stories and their one sugar in the cup. 47,000 people who would now have a protocol standing between them and the next Beverly Mason. And then I thought about the number. 47. The same number as the pages in Beverly's file about me. 47 pages of notes on how to exploit Dorothy Marsh. Are 47,000 people now protected because of what those 47 pages helped bring to justice? I do not believe in coincidences. I believe in Harold's gutters. Thank you, Priya. I walked out of that bank into the spring morning and I sat in my car for a few minutes, and then I drove home to my garden. That number, 47, is the ending of this story. Not the verdict, not the sentence. The 47,000 people who now have a protocol between them and Beverly Mason. Because one 26-year-old woman looked twice at a signature on a Tuesday morning and then picked up the phone. It has been 2 years since the trial. Beverly Mason is in state prison. Gerald Purcell has completed his sentence. Detective Gutierrez called me last Christmas just to check in, which I told her was above and beyond the call of duty. My arthritis is about the same. The garden is extraordinary this year, the best it has been since Harold, which feels like something. And though I am not sure exactly what, Susan and Michael call more than they used to, some recalibration of how much of ordinary life we had been treating as available on demand, as though time were an unlimited resource we could always get to later. I have a caregiver now. A real one, from a licensed agency with a background check and references and a supervisor who calls quarterly. Her name is Maria. She is 31 years old, and she makes my coffee with 2 sugars. I changed it after everything, and I trust her appropriately and not 1 inch more. I still think about Beverly sometimes, about the morning coffee, about the warmth that was real even when the intentions behind it were not. About what Dolores Patterson said in that courtroom, that Beverly was kind and Beverly was a thief, and both things were true at the same time. And I think she failed. She took $18,000 she cannot give back and she is serving a prison sentence, but she failed in the thing that mattered. I am still here. I still trust. I trust carefully with appropriate protocols and licensed caregivers and quarterly check-in calls. But I trust. Harold would have insisted on nothing less. I used to think the firewall account was about money, about Harold's practicality and his insistence on being ready for the thing that had not happened yet. I understand now that it was about love. He sat at that table in 1987 and he built something to stand between me and catastrophe because he loved me and because he knew, with the quiet realism of someone who had buried a father and 2 uncles before he was 40, that he might not always be there to protect me himself. He was right. He was not there. And Beverly Mason took 30% of what he left me. She took it. I cannot get it back. The house, the pension, the smaller accounts she never found, those she could not reach. But the 3 accounts she had mapped so carefully, account by account, across 12 months of conversations at my kitchen table. She took all of them. But she did not take the account. She did not take the principle of it. She did not take Harold's reason for building it, which was love, which is not an asset she had access to. The firewall held. He built it well enough that the firewall held. Her 5 signs. Beverly's method is happening to someone you love. Before we close, I want to give you something practical, because the most common question I get when I tell this story is, how would I know? How would a family member spot a Beverly before she has had 2 years to establish herself? Beverly's method had 5 stages. Each stage has observable signs. I am giving these to you so that you can recognize them. Stage 1. She always comes through someone you trust. A neighbor, a church contact, a mutual acquaintance. She understands that trust is transferred. If Eunice trusts Beverly, some of that trust automatically attaches to Beverly in my eyes. She exploited Eunice's credibility without Eunice having any idea. The sign to watch for: a new person who arrives through a trusted connection and immediately begins making themselves indispensable. 1 or 2 warm visits is a friendship beginning. 5 visits in the first month with expanding offers of help is something worth noticing and tracking. Stage 2. She makes herself necessary in small, reasonable-seeming increments. Ask yourself, has this person's presence in my parents' life gone from occasional to constant in a short period? Has my parents' reliance on them expanded across multiple domains, driving, medication, mail, finances, quickly? If yes, pay attention. Each increment will seem reasonable. The aggregate is what matters. Stage 3. She gathers financial information through conversation. She does not ask directly. She asks about the past, about the deceased spouse, about how the house was bought, about what retirement looks like. These sound like getting to know you questions. They are reconnaissance. The sign: your parent is sharing detailed financial information with a newer person in their life. Or not because they were asked, because the conversation naturally went there in a way that felt warm and safe and like intimacy. Stage 4. She does not pull the family away. She makes herself the easier option. She is available when your calls go to voicemail. She is present for the small daily things that family, stretched across distance and busy lives, cannot always provide. She becomes more relied upon not by pushing family out, but by filling the spaces between them. On the sign, your parent mentions the caregiver more than they mention family. The caregiver knows things about your parent's daily life that you do not. Stage 5. She moves when the window opens. Beverly chose my cancer diagnosis. She chose my hip surgery. She chose the moments when I was most vulnerable, most distracted, and least likely to be monitoring my accounts. This is not coincidence. This is design. She had been waiting for the window and she took it. The sign: a financial transaction, an account inquiry, a document, a transfer, happening during or immediately following a medical event or family crisis. That is a red flag that requires immediate attention. And the solution, the practical, actionable, Harold-approved solution, is architecture. A licensed background-checked care agency for any formal caregiving arrangement. Regular family account reviews conducted with your parents' full knowledge and cooperation. A trusted attorney for any estate or authorization documents. And the habit, borrowed from Harold himself, check the gutters before it rains. Do not wait for something to go wrong. Build the system that prevents it. The firewall is the thing between ordinary disaster and catastrophe. Build it. Build it now. Build it before you need it, because by the time you need it, it may be too late to build it. If this story hit close to home, if you recognized Beverly's methods in someone in your life right now, or in something that has already happened, please leave a comment below. I read every single one. There are resources, there are people who can help. You are not alone in this. And if you are in your 60s or 70s and you are managing alone and you are watching this and thinking, I would have done the same thing Dorothy did, I want you to hear this from Dorothy. You would have. And that is not your fault. Accepting help is not weakness. Accepting the right help from the right people with the right protections in place, that is exactly what Harold would have wanted. That is exactly what I want for you. This is what we do here. Real stories, full length, justice when it comes, and the honest truth about what justice costs. And to every Dorothy watching right now, look twice at the signature. Harold said so. Let us know in the comments where you're watching from. We'd love to hear from you. And hit that subscribe button right now so you never miss any of our upcoming videos. We'll see you in the next one.